We had to send $300 to our manufacturer for the pre-production copies. It took me 2 full days of working on this to send $300. And by the end of it, it wasn't me who did it. I had a relative in New York go to their bank and send the wire for us.
You've really expanded the Misplay umbrella.
Yeah, I've hired them now. They're the chief financial officers of the Misplay. I have Alliant Credit Union, and there's no physical locations. You can send a wire, but you have to send a fax first. How do you send a fax anymore? It's a process. I actually thought it was faster, and I went into another bank and tried to open an account, but they were like, yeah, maybe we can do that. I'm like, I don't understand maybe. And it needed to be done quickly. It was actually worked in our advantage that we had people on the East Coast do it back in New York, because even before I woke up, they had confirmed and showed me the receipt. And I sent that right to our manufacturer. They received payment.
You said 2 days of work?
Yes.
You're really rewriting the bar on how we're hemorrhaging money. 2 full days of labor, plus just to give away $300.
And $45 because there's a fee too.
So we're definitely in the red.
I did the expenses. We are so in the red.
I'm Hunter Pence, and you're listening to the Misplay podcast. Oh, yeah.
Hello, and welcome to the Misplay, where we play on our own domino sequence when we could block the community sequence in Mexico train dominoes. My name is Mark.
My name is Jason. Go on. I don't understand what that game is. Start there. What is Mexican train dominoes?
It's a variant on dominoes where you have a hand of some number of dominoes, and every turn you're playing a domino in your sequence, trying to empty your hand before your opponents. In this version, each player has an individual row of their own sequence, and there's a community sequence when your tiles inevitably don't fall into your sequence. And so you kind of run into this decision point of play on the community and have like one chance when it comes around to you, or play on your own sequence. Your own sequence is protected, and the community one is always available for anybody to play on. So I had an opportunity to get rid of a high value tile in the community, but I played on my own, and then I was stuck with that tile at the end of the hand and scored a lot of points that I didn't want.
True or false? I've played dominoes.
False.
Absolutely false. Absolutely no idea. True or false? The best use of dominoes is a Rune Goldberg machine.
False.
No, that was true. You got one right, one wrong. All right, let's start with the biggest news that we can share today before we get into the things. Our Kickstarter Notify Me on Launch page is live. You can now sign up to follow our Kickstarter campaign. The fastest way to get there is go to Kickstarter and then in the search bar type Under One Sky. For some reason, the first result is a game called Rope Walkers. The second result is our Under One Sky with Z's image that she talked about on the last episode. There are very few things that I reach out in our Discord and do and at everyone. This was one of them. This is a really important thing for us to get people to sign up for our Kickstarter so that when we do launch in September, that they get this message that says, hey, they're about to launch this, or they launched it. And it is going to be the metric that we are using as kind of our metric of success at Gen Con. I can tell you right now, Mark, there's 26 followers. I hope at some point in August, I can tell you there's hundreds of followers. The other really cool thing, Mark, that I think is going to be, and we just have to find a way to utilize it more, is our playing cards room. Our game is fully playable right now. We're offering people a complete digital experience of Under One Sky. And that's going to exist all the way through the campaign. And I think some people might be apprehensive of doing that, saying, you know, here's the game. People can play it for free. Why do you need to buy the game? I don't think that's the case. I think showing them where we're at, what it's going to look like digitally, and let them play now, I think that's a draw. I think that's going to bring people to the Kickstarter, hopefully.
I share that hope. I also think playing it digitally is a nice substitute, but since we did really design it as a physical game, there are things that are just going to work better having a physical copy. So if you happen to love the game on playingcards.io, we're confident that the physical experience of playing the game will be an upgrade to playing digitally.
Good lead in, because today we are going to talk about the physical playing of our game at the Bay Area Protospiel. And then in the other thing today, Mark, you're also going to be able to hear me give a 10-minute presentation that I gave called How to Make a Game at the workshop that we had at the Protospiel. I felt good about it. I felt like, hey, I'm a board game designer and I can talk to people about how to start making a board game. And it's a good summary of all the things that you and I have learned over the last couple of years. But before we do that, this week's episode is brought to you by Board Game Casual. Board Game Casual's YouTube channel welcoming people into the board game hobby with video reviews, recommendations, unboxings, tips for accessorizing on a budget, and more. I love the relatable content that they make. Most recently, 5 board games that need another play. And it makes me think of my closet full of games in need of a second or even a first play. Scythe 2 is on my list. Give Board Game Casual a view at Board Game Casual on YouTube, at Board Game Casual channel.
The thing.
They're less exciting without AJ doing the bumpers.
You know, that's just not my radio voice. Feedback from Bay Area Protospiel, because you got to do a bunch of playtests.
I did. And I'll tell you the best part about it, Mark, was most of the people that playtested the game were not board game designers, which is something we run into a lot when we're doing Golden Gate Game Maker events. Is while it's wonderful and great to have other board game designers play your game and give you feedback, ultimately that's not the audience. I think the people that are more likely to buy our game are closer to the casual end. And so people coming in, some of them were just shopping at Sports Basement, literally just like, oh, I saw a sign and I like games. Yes, those are the people that I would really like to play our game.
Boy, have we got a follow-up game for those people in our climbing game. Not only did you get to get a lot of playtesting, and you got a bunch of different types of playtests in. You had playtests where you got to teach the game. I know you got to run at least one blind playtest. So break down kind of the experience of being there, and then I took the liberty of putting the feedback that you shared in Discord and kind of categorized it so that we can kind of use it better to inform our next steps as we kind of go into our next refining process for Under One Sky.
We have reached the point with our game where we have said, and I say it to playtesters as well, the mechanics are pretty locked at this point. And I don't mind saying that to playtesters because there's a lot of other feedback that we're looking for when it comes to how to play the game and what the visual elements of the game look like. Only with a couple of people did we explore any possible mechanic change or rule change that would have been significant. Most of the feedback that we got was, and what I was looking for, was visual. The tiles, the rule book, the constellation cards, the star charts, the colors. Those are things that we can make changes on. It's not that we can't change the mechanics. We're happy with the mechanics. We like the way the game plays.
I think the feedback that you received is informed kind of by that description, especially if you were giving it to players, because there was not very much about gameplay. There was a lot more emphasis in the categories that you described. And so as we kind of talk about our feedback and how we're going to use that and what we'd like to do with it going forward, is it kind of broke down in my head into 4 different categories. There was language in the rulebook. There was the rulebook layout. There are the visuals, the colors, the design, how things present, how things are perceived by players reading the rules or looking at the materials. And last is gameplay, because there was just such a small amount of feedback. But I think it's worth talking about it because the specific feedback that we got in gameplay was something that we've talked about before.
And I'll repeat something that I've said before. When you get feedback, listen. When you hear it a second time, reflect. And when you hear it a third time, make a change. The thing that was consistently said to me, almost every playtest, was the wild tile does not look yellow. It doesn't represent the yellow star comet, whatever we're calling the yellow. Even that, do you know? Is it a star? Is it a comet? Because it looks dramatically different from the blue and the orange tile in the game, which I think is great. It does something dramatically different. But is it a star? You can't make a constellation out of comets.
I think by definition in the game, we're calling all of them star tiles.
Right.
And so they are stars. Yes, they look drastically different. And the comment that I'm going to come back to is something that I think is worth holding in comparison, or at least holding up to the mirror that you're holding up now, about how the star tile shapes are. The yellow comet, in scare quotes, the blue cross, and the orange X. We've gotten a lot of feedback about how the design of the star tiles, the images, support the gameplay because they reflect what the tile's mechanic and function is when you play it on the board.
And we have never gotten that feedback for yellow. People have said it doesn't look like it's turning clockwise even. But more importantly, Mark, what people are saying is they don't see the yellow tile reflected in the wild image, in the North Star. They don't see it. So they only see that tile as blue and orange, and they don't see it as yellow. And if you proportionally look at the color of it, you would say 40% of the tile is orange, 40% of the tile is blue, and 20% is yellow. So it's not an even distribution, and so people don't see it as yellow.
I'm fine with a change of adjusting, the color proportion. If you need to bring the tail into the wild tile, the North Star, I think that's fine. But it does sound like we're talking about two different things. I'm very happy to see the wild tile change to make it more clear that all three colors are present. I would be really hesitant at considering a wild revision of the tile designs.
Yeah, blue and orange, no change. I wouldn't make any change, even though I've heard some feedback that they look more like gems than they look like stars. I really like them. It's beautiful. But the yellow one, I think could be altered in some way, whether that's slimming it and making it thinner and making it a little bit more twisted and turning. Maybe you put something that looks a little bit more starry on it than just the circle. But regardless, we have to adjust the wild tile. I think that's a certain. We have to do that.
Okay. Easy sell. Sold.
The other thing that came up with the shape of the stars, and we've heard this a couple of times now from both new playtesters and from game designers, is the default shape that we're using as a star on the star charts and on the constellation cards look like the blue star. Right? If you just look at the image of the blue star, its shape is kind of represented on the star charts and the constellation cards. And it has made people go, oh, I have to make it with the blue stars. I can't make it with the orange, and I can't make it with the yellow. People have thought you could not win with yellow because the yellow star doesn't look anything like the images on the constellation and the star charts. And even Leonie, sitting doing a playtest, said, just use a dot, just use a round dot. Now, I don't want to use a round dot, but her point is taken that we should come up with a shape that does not make you think of any of the tiles so that you know that you can build your constellation in any star tile with any star tile. It does. It looks too much like the blue one. It looks like the blue one. And so people have thought they can only build or win with blue. Now, you and I hear that and go, that's crazy. We designed the game. We know you can win with any color. But I'm going to share some other funny things that to new players, they don't have the experience that we have with the game, and they don't see it the way we do. We're locked in on what it is.
I'm thinking exactly what you're saying, that I'm too close. I did not firsthand observe the playtest, so I'm thinking about the feedback that you're saying. I'm also thinking back to playtests that I've been at, and I'm fine. Again, I believe this is a fine change. I don't remember this coming up in previous playtests before. Now, we've also had different versions of star charts, and so that's fine, and maybe this does necessitate a change. But just to remind and kind of go back, I think the reason why you're resistant to just the dot, right, is because when we set out to design the constellation cards, we said, we don't just want to be like the hokey star. And so, and this is the question that you asked, what is the image that is clear that you're allowed to use everything and kind of stays away from that? I don't want to be condescending to just circles and stars, but avoids that kind of bland iconography that we have tried really hard to avoid with this game.
Yeah, and I like what Z has created, but I hear the playtester's point. It looks too much like the other tiles. We use squares on playing cards for a year. We only had squares. And it wasn't until we started designing the final art that we said we always knew we didn't want them squares, like you said, but what exactly are they going to be? We have to play around with that a little bit. Z has made some other options for us to look at. One thing a playtester said was, what if it was the North Star?
That was the first thing that jumped into my mind once you have a reworked version of it.
Yeah, we do a grayed out version of the North Star.
That would be my first go-to. My second go-to would just be looking at some of the other things that Z has done on other iterations of different things is the star at the top of the back of the constellation cards.
Yeah, that's pretty close to the North Star.
I want to pause because I want to come back to this discussion of how the tiles look, how the constellation cards look in showing the pattern for players. But I think there was one more visual aspect that we did get feedback on, that was the colors being too close between the star charts and the tiles, right?
I'm using my home printer, and so we've been really curious what the pre-production copies are that we're going to get back in a couple of weeks for Gen Con are going to look like, because I think those colors will be a little bit more clear and distinct than what I'm capable of printing on my home printer. But yes, people have told us that the colors we're using are a little confusing. Specifically, we have them broken into beginner, medium, and hard. And the first set, the one that I playtest primarily with, is the orange ones. And they look like the orange tiles. It's not like an exact match, but it's close. You would say, if you had to assign both of them a color, you would say that's an orange tile. You would say that's an orange card. Again, people have said, oh, I have to win with orange with this card because the whole card is orange. And for us, it doesn't make sense. But for somebody who's just sitting down and trying to learn the game, it makes perfect sense.
Again, being so thoroughly entrenched in every decision that has happened in the design and development of Under One Sky, it's a little bit hard to see. But like in other games, you're like, I draw the blue cards, so I need the blue resource in order to do that. Like it tracks, I think, in a wider way of engaging with board games.
And I'll take the blame because Z is probably listening going, trust the artist. I was really stuck on creating a palette, and I didn't want to have 13 different colors in the game. I wanted this beautiful palette, and these are the colors that we use in the game. So I think I limited us a little bit. I know Z has sent me a couple of texts since, and we've been talking about, what we can do to kind of expand that and make sure that the tiles and the cards are different colors, but still kind of fit into this beautiful palette that Z has worked on.
No notes, no comment, because I'm going to trust the artist.
And I strongly encourage people, if you're listening on a computer and you can just pull up the playing cards, you can look at exactly what we're talking about, because those images are exactly what I used at the Bay Area Protospiel. So you can go into our playing cards room. You can look at all of the cards that we're talking about and the shapes that we're talking about.
So if we're earmarking revision of North Star for visual and graphics, we're earmarking changing the colors of the star charts and constellation cards. And we're earmarking a possible change for the yellow star tiles. A lot of what we've done in our attempts to design the visuals for the game are to support different levels of the gameplay, right? The star tiles are designed in a way that are supposed to support the mechanical weight that they carry. Given that, let's turn to kind of the language of the rule book, because I'm still a little bit surprised at hearing some of this feedback, because it sounds like new feedback to me. And we've always been not cautious, but like we're always in that like listen phase, right? Of listen to feedback. And then if we're seeing our pattern, then we'll make adjustments. But I'm wondering like how the teach influences some of that feedback, because I don't remember teaching the game and seeing that. And maybe again, it's because of the new updated visuals that are presenting some of these challenges. But like something feels distinctly different from this set of playtests to previous playtests.
I need more time. That's a big answer, because some of the things that we saw based on whether it was the teacher or players were looking at the rule book, we've seen before. A couple of things were new and were different. So things that we've now seen again is players are still thinking they won the game when they build a constellation, but not all in one color. And Mark, I have made it a focal of my teach. I have said it I say it more than once in every teach. I show it. I start every teach with the T. I show it. I take a tile out. I put another tile, an orange tile. I make it in blue, and I take a tile out and put an orange one in. This is not a winning constellation. Put the blue back. This is orange. This isn't. I turn the board. I rotate it. I say it a lot. People have still made the mistake with me saying it multiple times. I don't know what is happening. I don't know how the brains are firing, but they are making that shape with just any 5 tiles. and believing that they won the game. Now, I've had people that they're playing with go, duh, he just told you like twice, 3 times. He told you it has to be all one color. And the people, oh, okay, yeah, I missed that. I missed that. And so we have to be very clear in our rule book. We have to have really good visuals that highlight that so that doesn't get missed, because it gets missed when you have somebody in front of you teaching the game to you.
That was the first concrete piece of feedback that I grabbed for specifically the rulebook language and content. We need more pictures.
Absolutely. And the second one is our definition of surrounding needs a really good image too. We talk about how the blue and the orange tiles are just very intuitive, right? They point in the direction the tiles move. Well, we could actually like refine it even more. If you had the blue tile only move the pieces it points to. So instead of the up to 8 surrounding tiles that we use, what if blue only moved the tiles that you pointed to? So there would be 4. They would essentially be the adjacent tiles. And then the orange tile points to all the diagonals. So what if orange couldn't move what was right next to it or on top or the bottom, but could move the 4? I don't think we should do this, but I'm just saying, intuitively, people have tried to play the game that way because it's pointing right at a tile that is eligible to be moved. So we need a really good image that shows what we mean by surrounding, because when people play the game, they still say adjacent. And the other word is touching. Anything that you're touching. Touching is a word that I've used in playtest. I don't use the word adjacent because I think adjacent only means the ones that have that, like the non-diagonal shares.
I'm thinking you said a lot.
There is so much to think about. When I see other games, I go, man, they must have spent a lot of time thinking about that. How did they get that to work right?
I feel like that's one of those questions you go and you put into like the Golden Gate Game Makers design Discord and be like, hey, I have this design question. Here's my problem. I'm having a problem with how to define these tiles. I'm having a problem defining surrounding. What language would other designers use?
That's a good idea. I'll just do that.
Because I remember we had like really fierce discussion about like the definition of adjacent, orthogonally adjacent, diagonally adjacent tiles. And part of the reason why we avoided it is because I don't know that we ever finished that discussion or got to a place where we were confident that we had a widely applicable enough definition to apply adjacent. And so there's a world where I'm looking back on it and being like, we've really done ourselves a disservice by not like really investigating the language earlier. Not that we can't change it now, but now it's like, oh, well, we have to go back and restudy that language, which is fine because that's like what we should be doing right now, right? We're finding things that are not making the game clear, easy to play, and flow. And most of all, clear to new players. Tell me about the blind playtest, because I think that's going to be the spot where we're most likely to see the really glaring language things that we need to address in the next version of the rulebook.
Well, I'll tell you the best thing about the blind playtest first. Let me start with that. They wanted to play it again. They played it a second time, in part because they flubbed the rules a little bit on the first playthrough. And the single biggest mistake that they made, and before I point out any of the mistakes that were made, all of the mistakes are on me. It is not their fault. And I really want to thank them for being willing to do that. I was in the middle of a game with another playtester when 2 people walked up and asked if they could play. And I said, absolutely, are you willing to do a blind playtest? And they were. And that's wonderful when people are willing to do that. The biggest mistake that they had made was when they were reading the rules, somehow, and I think it's the way that I printed them, because I went to FedEx and just printed our rule book. The pictures weren't coming out great on my printer. So I went to FedEx and just had a rule book printed. But I didn't bind it. I didn't like double side bind it. I double-sided printed it and stapled it. And when they were reading the rules, they were looking at the tile actions. The blue tile actions were on the same page as some of the gameplay rules. And then on the other page, it said tile actions, and it was the yellow tile and the orange tile. They didn't see that blue had an action. They were playing the game where you just place blue. It doesn't do anything, no effect. But orange and yellow, they had figured out how it worked. But they had also made the mistake of one of the players was only moving adjacent tiles. They weren't moving anything on the diagonal. They did not think they could push the diagonal touching tiles, just like what we were talking about. So that was really interesting. And I think that was more of a rule book layout issue then, we have to make a change. Though I think if it's possible, we should put all 3 tile rules on one page and then put the supporting images. I don't know. We'll have to figure it out. But there was something to that. Not only did they miss it, but while they were playing the game, they never questioned it. They just thought blue was just that you just place it, which, you know, orange isn't and yellow isn't. You would think maybe blue's supposed to do something. Let me go back and look. They did set up the constellation cards correctly. That was one of the things that I was really looking to test. So one player had their north up and the other player had their south up.
That's great. I think that's, you know, the layout was something that I identified as another one of those like broad categories that we want to, the rulebook layout is going to fall under kind of that graphic design section. And those are the types of things that we'll want to make sure that we're trying to account for or getting support and accounting for.
Here's a rulebook question I wanted to put you on the spot with, but I know you saw it in my notes already. Do you think, and playtesters have said this, when we playtest the game, Mark, even new people to the game go, man, it's really hard to win in yellow. I'm not going to even try. Why would I even try in yellow? Because we have said it before, blue and orange have that thing where you can go from 3 correct positions to 5 in one move. Yellow can never do that. You have to have the 4 set up and you have to have it set up 90 degrees off. Winning with yellow is just harder. And I think players like having that realization that kind of makes them go, oh, I figured this out. Yellow, don't try to win in yellow. It's too hard. It has a really good game function by rotating the board. It's worthwhile to have. We're not changing that. But do you think anywhere in the rule book we should say, hey, it's harder? Sometimes I do it in the teach. It's harder to win with yellow, but you can win with yellow. Don't think you can't.
I personally think we should not, me as game player, I like that moment of discovery. I like the idea that I'm going to lose a game to somebody who knows how to build with yellow. And then I'm going to see it. I'm going to be like, oh, that's something that I hadn't accounted for that is going to, 1, extend the replayability of the game for me. And 2 is, in my thinking about the way the theme of the game is part of this kind of like self-discovery with your friend. I would be hesitant to give such strict bumpers or guardrails in terms of guiding the first player experience or the new player experience.
Okay, I'm with you. I just wanted to throw that question out. I will tell you the one thing that I think helps that Scott did when he was doing the layout in the rulebook for the winning, when we show how you win the game, he used the yellow tiles, which I think is really smart.
100% agree.
The last bit of feedback that I want to share with you from Protospiel weekend actually happened on the Monday after the Protospiel. Greg Poole and I have been hosting an online Monday night digital workshop where we talk about how to playtest your game with, you know, something like screen top or playing cards. And if you're listening and you would love to, you know, bring one of your games to a playtest, come find us in the Golden Gate Game Makers the last Monday of every month from 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We're playing and testing digital games. But one of the things that came up in that playtest that evening afterwards was somebody had asked us, how come you're randomly putting out 3 tiles instead of just being able to choose whatever you want? And I thought I had a really good answer to that, but now I'm not sure. Do you have an answer to that question? And then I'll give the answer that I gave.
My short answer, without taking into account the other history of the game, is the level of decision paralysis. If you can always choose the color that you want, then you have to account that your opponent can also choose every color every time. And so when I'm building, if I'm playing defense, the way that players that have played the game more frequently or in larger number of games, playing defense becomes harder because now you have to account for more, the number of things you have to account for explodes. And so I think part of it is you reduce the decision trees that are available in the game.
Okay. The answer that I had given was that, one, we had tested it and we didn't like the way the game felt when you had access to everything. But that was also 10 versions ago. We have not tested that with, you know, since we've locked the star tile in the center. We haven't tested that in a long time. And I did think after hearing that feedback, it was worth trying. And we did. We played another game on playing cards that night. And the observer and the person playing were like, oh, I kind of like that more. So I think it's worth us doing some internal runs and just seeing how that feels again with the latest version of the game. But I think it's great that they can't always do what they want. We talked about this before when we used to have 4 tiles out instead of 3. When you have 4 tiles out, you will have all 3 colors like 90% of the time. And it was just like, well, what's the point if you're always going to have access? I like the games where there's 3 yellow there and people are randomly going to the bag. I think when you can play any color you want, I also think that gives away more information than you want. I think I like the way the game feels when there's constraints. When, look, 6 blues just came up and you got to play them, and now the game is going to get a little hectic. Be careful where you put those.
I would venture a guess you also get more variety in those scenarios where you don't have all the options, where you have a disproportionate number of blue tiles show up or a disproportionate number of yellow tiles show up. I think you're going to get a wider variety of flavors of the game. Whereas if you are always playing choose your color, the games will look more homogenous over time as you play the game more.
I think the tie percentage would go up personally if we started playing that way.
I agree. It's worth re-exploring, because I also think one of the things that was different about the previous time when we were playing Choose Any Color is the tile mechanics were different.
Yes.
I think we were playing with remove a tile at the time, or the yellow tile was like the gray tile switch, and those were
broken.
Didn't work very well.
Worked incredibly well.
A little too well, one might say.
So I want to thank Ronald with the Golden Gate Game Makers, who put on the Bay Area Protospiel at the Redwood City Sports Basement. We had an event at a sports basement near us. It's a great spot. I mean, they're so supportive of the community. I was so happy to be there and to play test and to have people come and try the game, especially people that were just wandering through Sports Basement. My son was there as well, and he attended the workshop that you're going to hear in a couple of minutes, and he built his own game and got feedback from other game designers. So it was really it felt like a full con for me, because I was there Friday, I was there Saturday, I was there all day Sunday.
I'm sad that I wasn't able to go. But now you get to tell me all about it, because your weekend was not just about Under One Sky. Your weekend was also about getting to share a little bit about what you've learned over the last 2 years for board game design with, dare I say, an audience as a board game designer teaching other aspiring designers.
And the other thing, yes, they were looking for volunteers. And I reached out to Ronald and said, I would love to do that 10-minute presentation. So they had a workshop set up for people to come in and to build a game. So it was geared towards people who had not built a board game before. And the Golden Gate Game Makers had brought in a whole bunch of components. And their plan was to have somebody do like a 10-minute overview and explain what a board game is. And then they would give them like 40 minutes to build a board game. And then they could show it to a designer to get feedback. And I volunteered to do the 10-minute intro to what is a board game, because I was teaching my summer class to 10-year-olds, teaching them how to build a board game. And I felt confident that I could speak to people in a very basic way. If I was speaking to other game designers, I'm not the person you call on to do this. Not yet. Maybe one day. But for new game designers, I really did feel confident that I could give them a good overview of what is a board game, how you go about building a simple board game for an event like this.
Give me the highlights before we play the clip.
Highlights, Ronald allowing me to do it, essentially being super supportive and having me come in and do that. So that's number one. Number two is the audience was really attentive. In fact, I went over to somebody, Mark, I kid you not, afterwards and said, I really appreciate your active listening. As a teacher, we're so used to talking to people and not getting a lot, especially the elementary kids, not getting a lot of responses back, people nodding their head. And there was one particular woman in the audience who was such a great active listener. And as a speaker, you just really appreciate that. And so I went over and I thanked her. But the games that they built were really cool. Do you know that somebody built a game about finding constellations in the sky? Mark, they had a board that rotated around. I don't know how they even built it with the paper and some of the clips, but their board rotated around. I had said somewhere in the presentation that, tag, isn't a board game, but so they built a tag board game. There was another game where they were coming up with a way to design an outfit and score points based on a criteria. And they had like a thrift shop store. And of course, my son built a game as well. He had this mechanic where you close your eyes and roll a component, and whatever square you landed in is where you started. It was really cool to see all of the games that they created. So apologies for the little bit of a derailment here. You're going to get to hear this presentation that I gave, and it really is a reflection of everything that I've learned over the last couple of years about how you build a board game and keeping it simple. And I talk a little bit about theme and mechanic, and I play a game with them where they have to create a game with some components. And then I give them some advice for them to take with them to their board game design workshop, where they're going to have 40 minutes to build a board game.
Without further ado, we present Jason Parmalee from the Misplay live at Bay Area Protospiel 2026.
What is a board game? This is where we started too. About 3 years ago, we had to figure out, well, we want to make a board game. What is a board game? Is a card game a board game? Is Uno a board game? What do you guys think? I see some thumbs up, nodding. Dungeons and Dragons is usually ones that gets me in trouble. People who really enjoy Dungeons and Dragons, probably that's not a board game. They might say it's a tabletop role-playing game. And tag, if I ran around, this is my son. He's not going to let me tag him. He's good at tag. Is that a board game? No, that's not a board game. I think we can safely say tag is not a board game. But I don't want you guys today, when you're building games, to get caught up on any definition of what a board game is. I put Candyland up there for a reason, because when you talk to board game designers, you're gonna hear them say Candyland is the worst game ever created, and they're serious about it. They're like, it's not a good game, and because they're thinking about it from their perspective. But Candyland was not created for somebody like me. Candyland was created for my youngest son, who's about 4, and he's not reading yet. There are so many great elements in Candyland for my son about learning to take turns, colors, there's no words, about it's okay to lose, you didn't win, or this totally random event happened. So Candyland is an amazing game. It's just probably not for all of us. So when you think about board games today, your game should have rules, it should have a goal, and there should be some player experience. Meaningful or interesting is something we can talk about later. The foundation of game design really comes down to these two things, theme and mechanic. And if you asked 10 board game designers what was more important, theme or mechanic, you're going to get 11 answers. And it really is the chicken or the egg of board game design. What do you have to do first when you're trying to plan a board game? Do you got to come up with a theme? Do I have to know it's about pirates? Or can I create this interesting mechanic where I'm, trading cards with people? It doesn't matter. Don't get caught up on that. But do know that theme is what your game is about, and the story and the setting and the world and experience where it's happening. And mechanic is how your players are playing the game, what they're doing. Are they rolling dice? Are they moving cards around? The best piece of advice that I can give you all day is to start small. If you're thinking, man, Ronald didn't put out 100 cards over there. I have this really great idea, but I need 100 cards. You don't need 100 cards. You can start with 10 cards. You only need 2 rules in your game. You don't have to have 8 different resources in your game. You want one really simple goal. You want a way, usually for what we call a victory. It could be cooperative as well. It doesn't have to be just me versus you. It can be a cooperative experience where you're trying to achieve something. So you want one goal. You need a way to get there. That's what we call our mechanics, what the players are doing in the game. And then I would encourage you to start thinking about interesting choices. I think most of us are not building a game right now, and maybe you are. Maybe you have a younger sibling, or you have a child, or you have a niece, a nephew, a friend, and you do want to build a Candyland game, and you don't have to have an interesting or meaningful choice. That's okay. But I'm going to guess most of you want something interesting in your game. The other thing that you guys can do is you can steal. You should take ideas from other games. Monopoly, roll and move. If you walk around and you look at the other games that are being made here later, you're going to see that most of these games are using something you've seen in some other game. My game's included. Uno, you're matching colors. Chess, you're moving pieces with different powers. You see that all the time. Remove that pressure of thinking, I have to make something unique, something nobody's ever done. That is incredibly difficult, and that takes a long time. I can tell you that most of the games that are being worked on here, these are years in development. The game that we're hoping to launch later this year, I'll show you a quick picture of, I've been working on for more than a year. So think about mechanics that you already know in games, and you can use that. There's nothing wrong with using something from another game. You guys are going to help me here on this next slide. We call all of the things that you're going to be using in games, everything over here along the wall here, components. Those are the things inside the games. And I just got done teaching a board game design summer class to 10-year-olds, and I use this slide. I give them a board, I give them a couple of cards, and I give them a couple of dice, and I tell them, make a game. Most of them are going to make exactly the same game. They're going to roll the dice, and they're going to move the cars along the path. That's their game. And it works. You've got a beginning, you've got an end, and you know the mechanic. They're going to be rolling a dice and moving the cars. But I'm gonna put you guys on the spot for just a minute. Can you guys make this game more interesting for me? And you're not limited to just the things you see here. Anyone have an idea to make this a little bit more interesting? Is it London?
Yeah.
It's in a case.
Like you can add like Monopoly. There can be like at the end, you have to go back to the start unless you have like a certain amount of money.
Yeah, you get to the end, but if you don't meet whatever condition there is, then you have to go back to the beginning. You've made the game more interesting. What would you do?
You can add like obstacles.
Obstacles. So he's got two things. He's got obstacles, but then he's also created some condition when you roll two of the same numbers. So if you roll 2 5s, something happens. Maybe you're not moving 10 spaces. Maybe you're going backwards if you roll. Anybody else want to try to make it more interesting? Yeah. A game of chicken. You're going, yeah. We don't have to both start at start. They can both be starts, and we're going to go into the middle, and then something's going to happen when we get to each other. Yeah. Yeah.
You're making a game where you try to balance the dice on top of the car.
Okay.
The car like this.
You got to balance the dice on the car, and you got to move it around the board. More interesting. My wife said this morning, roll the cars and move the dice. And I'm like, go for it. What do you got?
If you roll an odd number, you get like a boost card.
Yeah.
Roll a even number, you get a speed bump.
Odd numbers do something different than even numbers. Yeah, you guys, I got it. I think you guys are going to be able to make games. Keep in mind, your first version is not going to be good. Your first version of this game is not going to be good. It's not supposed to be. It's really hard to make a good game. And you guys are going to have 40 minutes to build a game. Don't set your objective as, I need to make a good game. Make something that you can work on later and improve. I have a game that I bring to playtesting events. We don't play the whole game. We just test this like one little part of the game that I'm trying to make work. So think about where your inspiration is going to come from when you're making a game. If you're not sure, if right now you're thinking, man, I don't have any ideas, walk up and down the components. Look at the components, and you're going to see some pieces, and you're going to go, oh, that's going to spark an idea. Think about other games. Think about real life. I have this idea for a supermarket game because I'm always standing in the supermarket line, and I'm wishing that I was in that line because that line's moving faster. And then I move over there, and then, of course, they've got a coupon. And now I wish I'd stayed over there, and so now I got to move back. Real life things create really great games, and I imagine that's where a lot of games get their inspirations. Connect 4, but 3. Chess, but no pawns, because pawns are no fun. I said I would show you kind of a quick look into my board game design. The game that I'm demoing here and the game that we're hoping to launch later this year, I went back and found my earliest screenshot. We do a lot of digital playtesting online because the team that helps me lives in different places around the world. And so we use this program. It's called Playing Cards. And I have created a board game. It's tough to see, but those tiles are different colors. It's a 4x4 grid, and there's some patterns here. So I've been working on this game for a year, and this is what it looks like now. Again, color because the projector is hard to see, but now we've added art. We've paid an artist to do the art for our game. There's still 3 pieces. There's a lot of things that are still the same from that original design. Instead of a 4x4 grid, it's a 5x5 grid. One of the pieces still moves exactly as it did before. The other 2 ones, those abilities changed, and it took us like 50 versions of the game to make that happen. We play tested so many times until we were happy with how all the pieces moved. But one of those, that's been the way it moved the entire time. So we hung on to that idea. I got one more slide for you guys before I send you guys off. When you go to build today, just remember that every game out here, and in fact, a lot of games out here are still kind of messy. Okay? We're building prototypes. These are not finished games. But the things for you to think about is, how is a player going to win, or cooperative? How are they going to win together? What choices do I get to make as a player? What's the most fun? I think when you guys think about games that you play, you've probably played many games one time, and you haven't gone back to it because it didn't capture you. It wasn't necessarily fun for you. And then, can you explain it in 1 minute? I think when there are, you're going to have other game designers walking around and giving you some feedback. If you can very quickly just tell them in one sentence what you're trying to do, they'll be able to give you some really targeted and some really good advice. With that, I would like to thank you guys for your attention. And nobody laughed and was super silly about me holding a microphone that isn't projecting any sound here. And I really appreciate it. My name is Jason. I'll be walking around as well if you want to ask me any questions.
Well done. I know that was probably a really cool moment for you, getting to present your learning that you've been doing over the last couple of years.
Definitely a highlight from this whole experience.
Maybe Gen Con will book you for 2027.
I think they should. And, the only thing I regretted was at the very end of that, I didn't say thank you to Ronald and the Golden Gate Game Maker. So I want to make sure I do that right now. Thank you all so much.
The Misplay podcast is brought to you by Howleboy Games. Consider donating at buymeacoffee.com/themisplay. We express our humble gratitude and recognize any level of support here on our list of sponsors. If you'd like to become a featured sponsor of the show, find our form at themisplay.com/sponsors. If you'd like to be notified on launch, you can find the game and the website at kickstarter.com/projects/themisplay/under-1-sky.
Or as I said, go to Kickstarter and type under one sky in the search bar.